Shabbat Shalom, and I'm glad everyone has been able to be here. Uh, and Rabbi, are you doing all right?
Yes, thank you. How are you feeling?
Okay, okay, it's stable, and at least I'm trying not to slur words
Okay.
because of the medications.
You were much more uh, sensitive to it last week than you needed to be.
Yeah, well, even though that happened to me following surgery. Somebody approached me in the post-op room years and years ago and asked me if I had a list of the patients for making rounds the next day, and sat up straight, gave him a full report, back to sleep. It just comes with the turf. Oh golly, here comes Beth.
Hello, Beth.
Hello.
Hi, Beth.
Morning, Beth.
Morning, everybody.
That it gets collected at the end of the drain.
Well.
Oh, golly. Well, it's time for us to get started. Gail and I are on a tear here, exchanging nature information. But I'll read our opening prayer. Steve, why don't you do it?
Okay. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah.
Amen.
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 Well, last week you would think that just like in previous chapters, in previous books, where it ends, with these are the laws and rules and directions, etc., given to by God to Moses on Mount Sinai between himself and the Israel, and it's himself with a capital H, and the Israelite people. So it's not Moses but God and the Israelite people. You would have thought that would have been the end of the book.
Would you like me to do my
Oh,
poem?
I'm sorry, David.
English reading.
I apologize. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Today's quotation to celebrate this magnificently beautiful day is from William Blake, Auguries of Innocence. He wrote that in 1803. To see the world in a grain of sand, and a heaven in a wild flower, hold infinity in the palm of your hand, and eternity in an hour. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. But we're going to hold eternity in 2 hours. Today.
Well, it's going to be 2 hours, but it'll seem like an eternity.
Oh,
Go ahead.
touche.
Maybe that which is eternal as opposed to eternity itself.
Move on, please.
Oh, it's okay. Anyway, what's in the literature concerning the things we're going to be reading today is basically thought to be an addendum that was inserted into at the end of the book of Leviticus. Two addenda, okay, and hopefully we'll get to both today. And it's a very interesting concept that here we think that it was all written at the same time, but for whatever reason, and this is what I've look at, and maybe the rabbis and other people who have gone through the Torah before can add to it, is that these were like addenda to suit the time within which they were written, to make things more acceptable because of issues that had arisen during a later time. And so I'm going to ask the rabbis first if they would address this, because we're told that the entire book was given to us at Mount Sinai. But here, some people are saying that because of the way it's divided, and it's like these two little extra chapters are like addenda to what is already written. So I'm going to start with that opening to our Torah reading today. So rabbis, I'm putting you on the spot. Yes, Rabbi Norman.
Well, before I try to respond to your question, I actually need to say something that takes us back to a different discussion from last week. Marty, I hate to say it, but I'm having trouble hearing you, and my volume is all the way up on the computer.
Okay,
I'm gonna try to move this a little bit closer, we'll see, because we're only three.
Okay, so I think I only heard about 60% of the question.
I heard okay. For a change.
okay, so
That's better.
anyone, that's better. Okay,
That's definitely, at least for me. Michael's not here to pipe in, but maybe it's the musician's ears. I'm not sure.
anyone else having difficulties? All right. So basically, I was mentioning that some people have said what we're about to read today are addenda to the Torah that because they appear to have been written by, and some feel this way, that these were ideas out of necessity in which the time they were written. But yet, we have been told that Torah, all of Torah, was given to us at Mount Sinai. So I'm tossing it out to those who have much more expertise in the subject than I do. So rabbis and anyone else who has studied this, chime in, please.
Well, it ultimately, I'll begin. It ultimately comes down to the way that each of us responds to the question of the origins of the receiving, Kabbalah Torah, how we received Torah, whether it was all at one time in one moment at Mount Sinai, which certainly that has been a prevalent, if not the mainstream belief through centuries, but over the last maybe almost 175, 180 years now, biblical scholarship leads us into some different thinking. So, as I understand the traditional explanation or response to your question would be that every speaker, every teacher, including Moses and even including God, is entitled to an afterthought here and there, okay? Or after a particular digression in the lecture, in the sermon, in the teaching, in the class, whatever, to come back to where we started. So the very traditional context would see this next chapter, and as far as we go with it, as some let's come back to where we were talking about before. Not that everything else was a digression, but we need to come back again to the important role of the sanctuary and how each individual Israelite relates to the sanctuary and how he or she defines themselves within that, the sacrificial cult and the rituals that relate to the Levitical practice, if you will. So that's how the traditionalists, I think, would probably respond to your question. The more critical and more contemporary biblical scholars would probably, I don't have that particular text in front of me, either a Friedman or any of the others, but that might say no, yes, this is an addendum, and the biblical editor representing different writers for the anthology decided that there was something that needed to be placed in here almost as a commentary before we move on to what's going to be coming, the story now of all the wanderings in the desert, and before we get there are some little pieces that we have to tidy up. And it may be out of a chronological sequence. That happens frequently. It may be out of chronological sequence, but they felt that thematically it could be linked. It could be linked in that sense. We don't have any record, at least to the extent that I've studied it. We don't have any record written down as to why the Masoretes, the traditionalists who decided chapter and verse and decided which portion should start and which portion should end where, we don't have any written record as why they justified their particular decisions.
Okay. That is a good explanation. Anyone? Oh, Steve, yes.
Yeah, well, and also something that I think the rabbi hinted at or touched on is there's a very traditional saying that ein mukdam ve'ein muchar b'Torah. So that's sort of, there was a recognition by traditionalists and by scholars, Jewish scholars, not, modern ones, but ancient ones, that things don't exactly fit and they don't come in chronological order, and they recognized that fact and said that there isn't any. It literally translated, it means there's no early or late in the Torah. In other words, you can't decide that, because something appears before something else that had happened before something else that may have happened afterwards. Things got a little, for whatever reason, mixed up. So, but I don't know, maybe rabbis can enlighten me a little bit more on that. Why that justification was given? Why they allow themselves to say ein mukdam ve'ein muchar b'Torah, because you would think that it's, if it was given, all at one piece, that it would be given as a logical piece, as a logical chronology, not. So yeah, Rabbi.
I don't know if Rabbi Miri wants to jump in, but I do have some kind of things to share.
Go ahead.
Okay. So there's two things. One is that statement of no present, future, past. Nothing came before, nothing, but that everything at one moment was written down in to explain two things, as I've been taught. Two things. One is that there is no correct chronology. Okay, and especially if we go back into late in Exodus, in Shemot, when Moses at the top of the mountain? Is he back down with the people? Is he at the top of the mountain when he says this? Is he back down with the people? And I don't think that he was a commuter, back and forth. But in one chapter he's already back down, but in the next chapter he's still up on the top of the mountain, etc. So there's no, there's no present, past, future in that sense. The other is, and we've mentioned this a couple times, you have to realize the Hebrew grammar in the Torah is that a verb written in the past tense in the Torah text has to be understood in the future, and vice versa. If there's the Hebrew letter vav before it, if there's no letter vav, then it could be exact, written as a history document. But technically, you would be reading, and Moses will speak to Pharaoh as opposed to Moses spoke to Pharaoh. So they came up with the statement of Ein Mukdam, that there's no future, specifically of how long before the grammatical didacticians were able to explain all that. That's how they put it into the right kind of context. That's what I was taught.
Yeah, just a question to that, if somebody knows, I don't know, but I'm just curious, if there's Vav Hayipuch in other Semitic languages, if that occurs.
I believe that there is in some of the classical texts, not in modern language, but I believe in some of the ancient Semitic texts that there was. Yes.
Yes, Rabbi Mary.
Okay, this time you can hear me, right?
Yes.
Very clearly.
Barely?
No, very clearly.
Okay. Well, I think that by now you know the way of my thinking about Torah, which is, I'll start with what Steve said. We are looking, when Marty asked the question, he's looking for a present, the way that in modern writing we write, which is sequential, which is logical, which we try not to repeat verbs, not to repeat this, not to repeat. So that many times, Marty, it leads us to look at Torah in that way, and it's not in that way. I don't think like Dr. Hoffman, whom I'm reading with a lot of pleasure. I dispute the idea that the Torah at that time was written and it wasn't an oral document that was written later on. That's my belief. So if so, and we can show that when we have two creation stories, two flood stories. Why do we have that? I mean, the question would come there as well. And I have a friend that does, they are sitting around the fire and they're telling the story, and Yankele says this, and then Jacob said, no, that's not what. It's like Hillel and Shammai discussing, and then they decide to put both stories. So that's something that we don't need. This is how I think, and I apologize for that.
No need to apologize.
Well, it's a kind of, well, in any case, now think about it. If it was oral Torah, and this person comes in the days of Shuk, in the day of market, which is Mondays and Thursdays, that's why we read the Torah then. And he says, do you remember what I told you last time? Ooh, well, not exactly. So, okay, I'll tell you again. So, that can be a way of thinking about it. The other thing that I want to emphasize, and this is again, when we say that they gave the Torah, what does it mean, gave the Torah? The Torah was giving and the Torah was received. We tell the story about the Ten Commandments and the stones and so forth, but we don't tell the story at that moment of what happened first, what happened what are all the rules, etc., etc. So to call this the Sinai moment the giving of the Torah is kind of strange. The whole look for the Torah is a document of teaching, just like the verb Torah tells you. To teach, to show the way, and so on. So you can see that the way I look at it, it's not, as Rabbi Norm said, the traditional way of looking at it. For me, the giving of the Torah is not like one time this happened. I'm giving you the Torah, just take it. Okay, we'll receive it. Let me put it this way. Rather than a document, it sounds to me very poetic. That there is no beginning, there is no end. And as Steve said, you can put this wherever you want and this wherever you want, because there is no sequence of the way that we look at writings today. So I'm questioning the questioning, that it's the question that Marty poses is based, and I'm not saying that's yours, Marty. It's based on a modern way of thinking of literature or of law. So that's why that disparity for me is crucial in understanding.
Very good, very good. Yes, Rabbi Norman.
If I may, just as a commentary, my teacher, the late Jacob Pedachovsky, his book is called Ever Since Sinai. He said it's really not so important who and how and why the Torah was given, so much as how it is received.
Right.
Okay, and how we as a people continue to receive Torah. So, just a little commentary there.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's a very good way of putting it. It's open your mouth. The Buddhists talk about, right, Gail? Correct me. You open your hands to the receiving. You open yourself to the receiving. Because if you don't put your hands like that, whatever they give you falls to the ground. Yeah.
Very well stated. Yeah, I think each one, other people may have other ideas that haven't spoken yet. And Marcia, Beth.
Um,
Go ahead, Beth.
okay, so I was listening and watching this really fascinating TED Talk this morning, a scientist talking about language and how we perceive things depending on what our given language is. And so, for instance, she showed a picture of 8 birds, and she said, "How many birds are in here?" And she said, "So if you speak English, you counted those birds from left to right." She said, "If you speak Hebrew, you're going to count them from right to left." And and then she expanded on that. There are cultures that don't even have directions in left and right. It's all by a compass. And so if I said, "Oh, I have a bruise on my arm," I would say to the doctor that it was on the south side of my northwest whatevers. I wouldn't even use left and right. And people from those cultures have a better sense physically of where they are, if they're out on a path somewhere. And and this to me really talks about how we perceive Torah. I broke my arm. We would not say that in most other languages. We would say that the arm was broken, but that if I said I broke my arm in Spanish, they would think I was a lunatic who had intended to go out and break an arm like I break an egg for breakfast. And so when we talk about when and why and translations in the Torah, even if I grew up in Israel, this still wasn't, I don't speak the ancient language. I don't think in the ancient language. So when we talk about whether or not Moses was schlepping everything down the mountain, I mean, I always think about how heavy those stone tablets were, and he had to be a really strong guy if we're thinking of it literally. I I don't care when I actually don't care. I mean, it's interesting to talk about the historical moment, but I think the fact that we have it is, and we look at it and we turn it upside down and inside out and try to figure it out, it to me is far more important than the moment of receiving it, because we're always receiving it. If, as Mary said, you know, you are open to it, that's always. It's not like you read a good book and you go, wow, that was a great book, and you go on to the next. Well, with Torah, we spend our lives revisiting this great book. Okay.
Thank you. Grace, did you want to add something, or David, Marcia?
Well, I want to add just a quick one. We say Torat Chaim. Torat Chaim is life, as you know, L'chaim, is life and living. And one of the things that when I teach Torah, I say, you know, this is such an old book. Why do we have to read it all together? If it's not relevant to us, what's the point? So it's Torat Chaim is a live, is living document, dynamic.
And that's the key word that we're after, dynamic. And it is, if you think about the words and how they have been used in subsequent history, it will tell you that throughout the centuries, it has been extremely influential because of that.
Marty, come closer, please. Come closer to the microphone.
That doesn't have anything to do.
Okay, well, can you hear me better?
Yes.
A little bit, yes.
Okay. Okay, I will shout and try to do my best. It's the dynamics of Torah and the lessons, as you all mentioned, everyone. It is extremely important, and it has influenced so many people throughout the ages in the Western world. Okay, but it also has drifted into other areas of the globe, not necessarily by our intentions, but the intentions of others who have used this as a foundation in their own religions, namely Christianity and Islam. And so a lot of the concepts have been, that were laid down in ancient times, are still used today. You are very correct when it's stated that it's how you want to view it. What you bring to Torah is how you will interpret it. If you are, whether it deals within our religion or others, whether it is in influential in different times of history because of other leaders using certain phrases from Torah. It has been very influential. As I've mentioned before, I do know that the library of Thomas Jefferson included this, and he was also well-versed in Hebrew, which is interesting. So he, as Beth said, you're reading it in both, so he was reading it in two different directions like we do sometimes, especially those who understand the Hebrew and the English. And so you can see how the influence has been even on our early documents. Okay, and as you get to understand it, it depends on the, as was mentioned, the time and place within which certain people lived as to how they felt certain things should be approached. Now, then you have to ask the same question in regards to Talmud, okay, and the other books, Mishnah and Gematria, whatever you want to look at, even Zohar, and it brings to us, each one of these do not have a complete story, but it has been added to over the years. Yeah.
You know, I'd just like to say, as someone who converted to Judaism 40 plus years ago, one of the attractions to me, and I'm sure.
Trying to hear you, Gail.
You gotta shout it out.
Sorry.
Shout it out.
One of the attractions of Judaism to me, and I converted some 40 years ago, and I'm sure that Grace will probably agree, is that the Torah encourages discussion. It isn't a matter of saying, you got to believe or else, and period, and you're doomed. It's saying, no, think, do, try it out.
Yeah, that's the Talmud.
To me,
Yeah.
that to me is the attraction of Judaism, not the negative side.
Could I say something?
Yeah, go ahead, Steve, and then we're back to the rabbi.
Just, of course, as Jews, the Torah has had a lot to do with keeping us existing
Yes.
as a people. We feel very strongly emotionally attached to the Torah.
Mm-hmm.
But the Torah is not the only, I mean, as a Jew, I like to think that the Torah, the basis, there's wisdom like this is not found anywhere else. Well, actually it is. If you go to some ancient, Chinese, especially philosophical texts or Buddhist, you will find very, very similar ideas. And actually, the later, I guess, more medieval scholars were very well versed in non-Jewish wisdom literature. Maimonides was very well versed in Greek philosophy, and it shows.
Well,
and what he was and what he was writing.
Yes.
So we don't exactly, even though Torah is a beautiful document. It says a lot. We can find a lot in it, but there's a lot that's sort of common ideas of humanity.
Right. Exactly.
That this is found in
Well,
other literatures as well.
To finish my thought, not only it encourages discussion, but it encourages learning. And I don't mean just about Judaism, but it opens you up to all kinds of things, just like Steve was saying. And as some of you know, Buddhism happens to be, part of my learning experiences. And I don't find any conflict. I mean, it's a beautiful thing. But Judaism allows me to do this. Where so many other religions are, it's cut and dried and bang, 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 and that's the way it is. And no room for discussion. So, okay, enough.
Oh, you stimulated some, Rabbi Norman. I don't know whether it was Rabbi Mary or Beth who had their hand up next, in second. And Grace also wanted to, and so Rabbi Norman, and then we'll go from there.
I'm gonna play devil's advocate in a sense, okay? Because I think there's what we psychology students call the semantic differential, right? Between Torah referring just to the 5 books of Moses, or maybe even to the Tanakh, and Torah referring to all of Jewish sacred literature. Okay. So the traditionalists are going to quote the Torah itself.
Right.
Exactly.
It says, this is my Torah, says God. Do not divert from it to the right nor to the left. This is the word. This is what you should do. And nothing else. All right. So while we moderns and what we in the liberal streams of the Jewish world, while we take great pride in the approach to Torah Lishma, meaning the larger body of Torah, and saying, yes, these are guidelines, and these are the values, and these are the norms, and these are the Hebrews, these are the midot, these are the characteristics and the values that are important for Jewish life and that are unique to Jewish life. Many of them don't necessarily come just from the 5 books of Moses text, right? So the larger question historically has been who gives to any individual group, whether it's our Torah study class or whether it's a particular yeshiva or whether, or whatever it is, who gives the authority to that particular group or even to one rabbi to say, no, this is Torah. The way that I'm teaching you that this is Torah. That has always been, as I look at it, that has always been the dynamic. Not so much the Torah text itself as is the interpretation that we give to it, or the lesson. Rabbi Miri is absolutely 100% right that the Torah is a body of teaching. Okay, so the way that I interpret that particular quotation or mitzvah or whatever, with mishpat or chukah, the way that I interpret it, the way that I teach it to the people who are listening to me, they don't always follow, but to the people who are listening, what gives me that right? And is my word as a rabbi any different than Dr. Martin Cohn's word as a lay scholar, a very respected one and knowledgeable one, or anyone else? So as I look at the history, the dynamic is really the interplay between the different groups. Again, call them streams, call them individual rabbis, or Beit Hillel, Beit Shammai, Ashkenazi, Sephardi, whatever, whatever, Hasidim, Mitnagdim, whatever it might be, of each trying to show the authenticity or the validity or even just the viability, the credibility and the viability of their particular interpretation.
Excellent.
I think you're
Excellent.
actually agreeing with me.
So this is good. I really am appreciating this discussion quite a bit. Beth and Rabbi Mary, would
Grace.
you?
Mary, would you go first?
No,
Hey,
wait
it's not,
wait
it's
a minute. You can let me finish my
Oh,
question.
sorry.
It'd be okay since Grace hasn't.
yes.
She has to leave early. why don't we let her go first, and then I will go back to the two of you.
Okay.
Grace.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you. I think for me, because I'm so new to the idea, and let's see, it's 2017. I've been a part of this study. It enlightens me, and I just want to say this one statement: participation is the key to harmony. So all who participate in this study have something to offer, and I get more out of it than I'm able to give, because I'm just here to learn and to develop Judaism in my life. So I'm very appreciative of all of you. And it's very interesting because my thought was dynamic. It's a living thing. Study of the Torah is a living thing. We are all living things, and it enhances my life to study it with all of you or without you. So thank you.
Thank you for your insights. Very nice. Marsha obviously agrees. You made me very happy. And so Rabbi Mary and then Beth.
Yeah, again, when in the past, when I was especially teaching this kind of group, I used to pose a question, and people were, oh, let me see what's written about it, what this rabbi said. And I said, you know, Rabbi Steve and Rabbi Marty and Rabbi Gail, you are not less smart than all the rabbis that gave explanation. So just go ahead and do it. But once, I don't remember where I read it, that at the time of Napoleon in France, they were burning Talmud books, not Torah books, Talmud books. And then I realized the idea that the Torah itself and the Tanakh, because it's also the Ketuvim and the Nevi'im, the entire Tanakh was adopted also, is adopted by Christians and by Muslims. So it's not our Torah only. If you go into that realm, and it's over there as well. But the Talmud that asks the questions and analyze the things that the Torah says, quoting and so forth, it's unique to us. Those, and what Gail was saying, the issue of questioning, you know, I've been blamed for questioning things in my workplace. And I'm proud that I question, you know, it's not that. Don't give me one answer. But I want to question, and that's really our thing. When I said our is a Judaism thing, the Torah is also, and the Nevi'im and David the king and the Psalms and whatever is also ours, but it also belongs to others. So the Talmud, and that's why it must, and it comes also from the word lamed, which is en lilmod, that is teach and learn, just like the word Torah. So that were my words.
Very, very.
Marty, if I may, Okay. Just a minor, not correction, but emendation to Rabbi Miri. The same kind of commentary, it may not be the Talmud, the give Shaklavataria, the give and take, but the same kind of commentary of the biblical texts do exist in the Catholic Church, the patristic literature, things like that. The part of the difference, in addition to the tone, but part of the difference was going to be the accessibility.
Right.
Yes.
Okay. it's in the Jewish community, the Talmud and the debates and whatever, anyone could participate. Anyone
Right.
could come to the yeshiva and study and whatever, and then join in the debate. In at least the Catholic tradition, I'm not familiar with the Muslim, but at least in the Catholic tradition, those debates all took place behind closed doors, and the literature was not available to the general public.
Thank you. Thank you. Just
Okay.
like reading and writing belonged only to a certain group of people.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Mm. Wow.
That's-
But it was Steve one, and I kind of jumped in.
I
I'm
know,
sorry.
but this had her hand up long ago, so I'm gonna go to her and then to Steve.
So, back to long ago, as it seems, Rabbi Norm brought up the same thing I was thinking about, what I call the extension of Torah, that when we talk about studying Torah, if we just kept it to Torah and we didn't have all the commentaries, I mean, look at that last book, those last passages that we read about my way or the highway. If you don't do it exactly as I tell you, then horrible things are going to happen. So my question to the rabbis or anybody is, at what point, where in the Torah does it quote give permission to do exactly what we do? Where does it encourage commentary and discussion in the Torah? Or I guess the question is, how did we get there that it is so much a part of being Jewish is to ask questions without a lightning bolt coming and striking us dead?
Okay, Martin.
Okay, let me turn it over to Steve and then,
Yeah,
Others.
and not, I'd like to first address,
Sure.
so we don't
Sure.
lose this thread,
Sure.
okay? That's an important question. My understanding as a non-rabbinical, person, the main answer is ambiguity in the Torah. The Torah doesn't necessarily openly say, okay, this is God's commandment. You can, it's open to debate and interpretation. It's the way it's written was ultimately a bit ambiguous, and I'm sure the rabbis can elaborate more on that. Like they say, for example, you have to say Shema. Well, how many times a day? And do you say it when you first see the stars? Do you say it when you're already lying in bed? Or so there is. It's not so much. There was an open invitation in the Torah to say, here's a basis, go ahead and interpret it. It was sort of a necessity because the language itself was a bit ambiguous. And people had to kind of scratch their heads and say, hey, but what do they mean exactly when they say that? And then, so the rabbis had to debate it. Oh, well, this is what I think, or this is what I think. Sometimes it was a matter of language that had evolved and had changed.
That's right.
People weren't even sure maybe what the word meant, so they had to discuss that a little bit. The other thing that, that I wanted to bring up, there was a sort of a very interesting little mention, and it's a footnote, and it's not necessarily something to go into depth right now, why they chose to burn the Talmud. What they could, because that speaks
Why
to,
I'm sorry, Steve, why they chose what?
I'm sorry, I was getting a little far from the microphone. Why during medieval periods of anti-Semitism, they chose to burn the Talmud. And to my knowledge, there are, in fact, in the Talmud, again, I'm not knowledgeable enough to relay them, but there are some negative references to Christianity.
Mhm.
in the Talmud,
Mhm.
okay? So they may well have taken issue to those.
Hmm.
Also, the Talmud is, yeah, it's an exposition of Pharisaic Judaism. And Pharisees in the New Testament are the bad guys. So, you know, that may have had something to
Excellent,
do with it
excellent
too.
ideas.
Right.
Excellent,
Right, right.
very good.
I
Anyone,
can go back to Beth's question just for a minute.
please? Excellent.
The Torah text, as we have it, does not give us permission explicitly to question, debate, whatever. But implicitly, tradition always said, why did God use this word? I think Steve was a little bit alluding to this. Why use this word rather than that word? Why is this particular verb, and this happens frequently in the Torah, in the biblical grammar, why is this word doubled? The feeling was there's nothing extraneous there's in the Torah, and obviously God doesn't make mistakes. So if God said a particular word or a particular statement twice, but didn't clarify or didn't explain it, God must be giving us permission to try to understand it. And that gave us the opening traditionally to start questioning and wondering and retranslating, along with the reality that, again, it was for centuries, it was an oral tradition. And I don't know about you, but my hearing is not 100% clear. And I'm sure that if I was just listening to something for hours and hours and hours, I'm sure that there's going to be an occasional word that I might miss or misunderstand or mistranslate. And so, better that I ask someone. Did you hear? Did he say that Moses was on the mountain 40 days and 40 nights, or many days and many nights? Because I wasn't sure that I heard the word correctly. So the permission was given to start asking those questions, but there's no explicit, thou shalt interpret the word, thou shalt question or whatever. Does that help a little bit?
Well, it does in that when I asked the question, I was pretty sure that there wasn't any place that actually said you can now question everything I've told you is law. And so again, I think one of the wonderful things in Judaism is that we have found a way to take a document and look at it and say, but what does this really mean?
Right.
But because we read that passage so recently that was so harsh in terms of, follow me in certain ways or really, really bad things are going to happen. I think it's interesting that we're having the discussion following on the heels of that.
Yeah.
Because
and there's also the precedent that goes all the way back to Abraham of saying, God says, I'm going to do this. And Abraham says, wait a minute, God.
Oh, one of my
sure?
favorite passages.
Right. Are you
Is
sure that
trying
you
to
want to
make
do
that
this?
bargain?
Exactly. Right.
How many tzaddikim do I have to find so you don't destroy us?
So if Abraham, who sets the tone for the Israelite Hebrew Jewish people, if he can even question God's word, then obviously we have the permission to do so also.
But what
Doesn't
I-
mean that we're gonna like the answer, but we do have the permission.
Mhm.
What I would want to add to that is when the question is, what if? There is a responsibility by the questioner to listen to the answer and to mull it over, think about it, or they take action. And be open to other what ifs. And that's I think the key here. If one has that option, then we all have it, but we have to respect each other, and that will lead us maybe to a better understanding. I've lost track. I know Rabbi Mary has her hand up. Are you next, Mary? I guess so.
I think she-
Go ahead. Rabbi Mary, you've had your hand up.
Okay. Unfortunately, this group never got to study Nevi'im, the prophets, because it's the most beautiful, poetic thing to do. And in the prophets, you start listening to, for example, and I think it's Jeremiah, whom I love. Jeremiah said, guys, I'm just fed up with your sacrifices. Now when he says that, we know that he's relating to the Torah that required sacrifices. So we have in the Tanakh that question, Savati olot uzvachim. I just cannot take that anymore. Just behave properly, take care of the orphans, take care of the widows, etc., etc. Then there is this passage that is said about Rachel, that she's crying about the kids and so forth, Rachel vakal banea. So even inside the Tanakh, we have quotations of, it's not a question, but it's a quotation about, as Beth, you are saying, to say, don't do that. And, I think that Jeremiah belongs to us, maybe to other religions as well. But by saying that, in my mind, is not less than asking questions. And now I don't remember what else I wanted to say, so keep going.
Okay,
Uh,
Gail, and then I'm gonna
Ju-
put my hand up.
Just real quickly,
Okay.
the other thing that attracted me to Judaism.
Raise your voice, Gail.
So
Speak,
the other thing that attracted me is the fact that the characters, and I don't mean that in a bad way, the people in the Torah are not perfect. They're all flawed.
Right.
And I'm going, wow, what a concept.
They're human.
I can relate.
That's right, we're human beings.
That's me.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's good. So I just wanted to add to what is being said, to keep the waters riled, okay? Well, roiling waters are good, so. Just whenever the phrase "these commandments" are mentioned, this debate has gone on in Jewish history, just as we're having it here. But here's from Rabbi Plow, a commentary on two commentaries, emphasizing the word "these." Sifra states and declares, actually, henceforth no prophet may introduce anything new.
What
Okay.
is Sifra? Could one of the
Okay,
rabbis-
wait, we'll come back to that.
Oh,
Let me finish with this. But yes, that's the first question. And then the next part of Rabbi Plout's commentary is, yet, and fortunately, the men who were responsible for this statement found the means by interpretation and even by legislation of developing Jewish law and thought and to keep them responsive to the needs and circumstances of each generation.
Hmm.
Okay, so I think it's an interesting commentary on the commentaries. So as Steve says, just shout it out.
No, I just
Who
wanted
is-
to know, Sephra, what is, you said Sephra said.
Sifrei,
Who?
SIF, SIF, SIFRE or whatever.
R.A.
Oh, Sif,
Ah,
wait, Sifra or Sifrei?
Sifra.
that's a book.
Well,
That's-
it is a book. Sifrei is the way that I always heard it, is the halachic midrash on Leviticus. But maybe the Canadian, I don't know, we'll ask David. Maybe the Canadian pronunciation or whatever has it as Sifra. Sifra, maybe that's a different book. I'm not sure, but Sifrei
Okay.
is and it's halachic rather than agadic. Rather than legend lore, it's more halachic, legalistic, but it's midrash
Just repeat.
on Leviticus.
Steve asked me to repeat what the Sifra says.
Sephra, yeah.
Okay, henceforth, no prophet may introduce anything new.
New.
Right.
Got it.
And that's based
Well, after all, he's a prophet, so he has to tell what's going to happen. And he has a direct connection with God. That's one of the few people that do that. So when Jeremiah said, if you don't do this and this, look what's going to happen, that's new. The Babylonians are coming, or the Egyptians are coming from the south and from the north. That's my understanding. But another thing that I wanted to share that I forgot before is that it's my understanding that if you have a question, and I had a very close friend of mine who was Reformed, and he was in our rabbinical school, but he was married to a non-Jew. Now, the non-Jew didn't want to convert. So he went to this Orthodox rabbi and asked the question. Now, when you ask, this is my understanding, an Orthodox rabbi a question and you get an answer, that's final. It's not that there are many other answers. If there is an answer from Rabbi Miri or Rabbi Norm or Rabbi whatever, second opinion. But in that realm, so what you say, guys, there is a group of people that do see the Pope said, the super rabbi said, and you have to follow. You cannot say, do I need an abortion? Do I need to marry a non-Jew? Can I become a rabbi regardless this and that? So I wanted to emphasize that we have a stream that does that. We are more questioning. We reform, even
actually there are multiple streams of that same position, because an Ashkenazi person may not accept the answer of the Sephardic chief rabbi, and the Sephardic chief rabbi may not accept the answer of the Gera Rebbe, for his Hasidic dynasty. But yes, within their community,
Yeah.
yes, there's a one, right. Whereas many times in my 50 years, I've said, listen, this is the way I think about it. This is what I would suggest, but feel free to talk to Rabbi Schwartz down the road he may have matter of fact, I think he probably has a more sympathetic understanding of your particular need. Yeah.
Okay, Beth,
When I was bat mitzvahed, and then probably a year later, I went to my rabbi. We had a large enough temple that there was a senior rabbi and a junior rabbi, and of course, the junior rabbi gets to deal with all of the kids.
Right.
And I went to him, and I just love this man to this day, Herman Blumberg. Did you ever meet him?
Yeah, sure. Mhm.
Okay, terrific guy. I went to him and because I was really torn, and I said, Rabbi, could I be Jewish and not believe in God? He's a Reform rabbi. Bless his heart, he said yes. Because I needed that, because I was always proud to be Jewish, but I had questions, as I think a lot of people do at times, as to the existence of God. And so I'm really grateful that I grew up in a tradition, in a Reformed tradition, that gave me such a wonderful a solid Jewish education, and yet this man said to me, "That's okay."
yes,
Some of you will remember not so much the first two volumes, the Chosen and the Promise, but some of the other things that Chaim Potok
mhm.
wrote as a novelist, and he specifically had said, because I want to present to the larger population a different view of modern Orthodoxy.
Interesting.
You know.
Yeah.
You know,
I just, this is really in parentheses or a note underneath. Beth, in my, I'm a mix of reform and renewal. But one of the things that we learn, and I found it so profound, is instead of asking, do I believe in God? You ask, do I experience God? And Rabbi Zalman Shechter Shlomi used to say, I also don't believe in the God that you don't believe in.
I think,
Right.
Mary, that is an absolutely perfect explanation. Do I experience God? And it's beautiful, because
Yeah.
all we have to do is live our lives, and we experience God every day.
I just want to say, what we've really been discussing here is the word freedom. We have freedom to think, freedom to discuss. And that's what the Exodus was about, was freedom.
I'm sorry that Suzanne left the discussion, because it would be interesting to hear her perspective as whether, as a devout Christian, she feels that she is free to
Right.
develop her own belief experiences in that same sense. Just to point that out. Marty, was the plowed comment based on a particular verse?
Well, what we were about to read.
Maybe.
That to 27 or the end of 26?
The end of, well, let me double check.
You would said check 27.
No, yes, it was at the end of 27.
No,
Which-
No, 27 verse 1.
At the verse of Leviticus 27. We didn't even read this yet.
Yeah.
And
and so the plow. Okay, I'm just wondering which verse he's developing.
it doesn't, I think it's 34. of what we
Oh, of
discussed,
2734.
2734.
Okay, yeah, that's the end. It's the end of the book of Leviticus.
Right,
It's the postscript, if you
right.
will, of the end of the book. Okay,
So-
that I was wondering if that was referring to a particular pasuk.
Because what I was hoping to do was then to discuss, as Rabbi Plout does in his book, how the next passage, how this entire chapter 27 is divided into three sections: vows, gifts, and dues. That's how he looks at this.
Deus, right? Not DO.
That's right.
Deus, right?
That is correct. And I just found it also very interesting from that standpoint, because some of the wording is difficult, some of it is very straightforward, and I thought that it would be useful to get into this discussion to understand why he starts talking about time. And that is I know last time I brought this up about chaos theory, but if you think about it, we have been discussing all different ideas. That's chaos. Using this book to allow us to put order into the thing, but recognizing is going to be multiple interpretations occurring in the future. And that is, again, chaos theory. Because each time a new idea comes into play, it opens up newer ideas and newer ideas until we come back to the book to try to give us better understanding of why so many ways of looking after things. And then again, it starts all over again each year in the reading. And I think that's part of the beauty of Torah. And I think that Feynman was also using a little bit of his Jewish heritage here as well. So I want to all that. So because he was and wanted to come up with mathematics that would answer why clouds are the way they are. Okay, to try to put order into the scope of clouds. So anyway, getting back into this, with this discussion in mind, we can have other discussions, and I don't know how far we're going to get in this chapter. And
Possibly not too far.
not too far, but in here, Plout divides it up into three categories. One which, and here I have to rely on Steve's knowledge of etymology, and I'm going to need the rabbi's knowledge and Beth's knowledge and other people's ideas about vows. And I thought he divides this just like the chapter is about vows, gifts, and dues. So the first part, erech, or value, or is it erech or ekecha?
Echa is your value.
Your value.
So I'm not
Okay.
sure. I'll have to see where the pasuk is. I don't know, maybe.
Right, so that's the term he used to discuss this. Okay, the vows. Your value.
Oh, okay. Vows concerning value of something or a
Well,
person.
when you
or
make a
something,
vow,
yeah.
you're attaching a value to it. Basically, you're saying, if you do this for me, I'll do this for you. It's a vow. If you say, I just want to do it for everyone, that in a way, that's a vow. So there are different ways of looking at it. It's what, you know.
Except the common way I look at a vow
Mhm.
is you're obligated to do something. There will be dire consequences. It's not so much a contract. It's more like you're presenting something that you're obliging yourself to do, and you're also saying that there will be dire consequences for yourself if you don't do it. It's not so much
That's the way
a
it's
value thing.
That's the
but-
way it's stated here. But as we'll read, there may be other values attached to it. Rabbis, if you have any comments at this point.
The only comment is to quote Rabbi James Carville, it's the economy, stupid.
Okay. Well, we'll go to a higher priority. If somebody would, because of, let's go, this is, let's
Yeah, I
go
wouldn't mind reading.
verse one through the end of verse 15.
Okay, I'd be happy to read it to start.
Please.
And the Lord spoke unto Moses, saying, Speak unto the children of Israel, and say unto them, When a man shall clearly utter a vow of persons unto the Lord, according to thy valuation, then thy valuation shall be for the male from 20 years old, even unto 60 years old. Even thy valuation shall be 50 shekels of silver, after the shekel of the sanctuary. And if it be a female, then thy valuation shall be 30 shekels. And if it be from 5 years old, even unto 20 years old, then thy valuation shall be for the male 20 shekels, and for the female 10 shekels. And if it be from a month old, even unto 5 years old, then thy valuation shall be for the male 5 shekels of silver, and for the female thy valuation shall be 3 shekels of silver. And if it be from 60 years old and upwards, if it be a male, then thy valuation shall be 15 shekels, and for the female 10 shekels. But if he be too poor for thy valuation, and then he shall be set before the priest, and the priest shall value him according to the means of him that vowed, shall the priest value him. And if it be a beast, whereof men bring an offering unto the Lord, all that any man giveth of such unto the Lord shall be holy. He shall not alter it, nor change it, a good for a bad, or a bad for a good. And if he shall at all change beast for beast, then both it and that for which it is changed shall be holy. And if it be any unclean beast, of which they may not bring an offering unto the Lord, then he shall set the beast before the priest, and the priest shall value it, whether it be good or bad. As thou, the priest, valuest it, so shall it be. But if he will indeed redeem it, then he shall have the 5th part thereof unto thy valuation. And when a man shall sanctify his house to be holy unto the Lord, then the priest shall value it, whether it be good or bad. As the priest shall value it, so shall it stand. And if he that sanctified it will redeem his house, then he shall add the 5th part of the money of the valuation unto it, and it shall be his.
Okay. This is an answer to your question. There's a value to the vow.
Yeah, well, I'd rather than jump into that,
Mhm.
I'd like to know more, maybe from the rabbis, what the backstory is. There's a
Sure.
backstory here.
Oh, yeah.
That's kind of understood,
Mhm.
you know, I guess, but sort of this whole section is kind of jumping ahead on something, assuming that we know what they're talking about, and I don't exactly know what they're talking about. Okay, so I'd like to be enlightened. I'm sort of sensing that maybe this has something to do with people who like Pidyon Ben, for example. You know, we have a custom still persistent in Judaism of Pidyon Ben, redemption of the newborn.
Mhm.
That you have to pay, I don't remember what it is, a shekel or 5 shekels, that theoretically the newborn does, or the firstborn, I'm sorry, Pidyon Ben is.
Firstborn son.
Yeah,
But
that
so
firstborn son
there's
is
two
actually,
criteria. Has to be a boy and has to be the first, the one that opens the womb.
Right.
so I
The
just,
area doesn't count.
I just want to understand this section. Is this talking about various situations where a person, a son, a daughter, a child is dedicated, and then in case you want to redeem that child, how much you have to pay, or yeah, Rabbi's got an answer here. So,
Okay, yes.
So you asked about backstory. So
Yeah.
here are a couple comments. And the predicate, I guess, the premise is that we are now coming to the end of the book of Deuteronomy, of Leviticus. Okay, this is the last chapter, literally. So this is like the last thing. This is what you want to leave them with. Um, okay, so it's a reminder, and here I'm leaning towards the biblical scholars again, rather than that this is all coming initially from God. But the biblical scholars who say that this particular part of the Torah was indeed written or edited by the Levites and by the priests, not only to show their dominance, but to reflect their needs. That's why I said it's the economy, stupid. They need to make sure that the sacrificial necessities are going to be either provided for, or by persons who pledge themselves or pledge their children. I'll come to that in a minute. Or that there will be the procedure by which someone who doesn't pledge themselves or their child can pay a particular amount, so that the sacrificial cult and the temple can, it's like membership dues kind of thing, or pledges to the building fund, or or whatever the Torah campaign, whatever it might be. So yes, that's the premise. That's the underlying statement. So yes, there's reference when it talks about individual people to children. It refers back to the Pidyon Ben, to the redemption of the firstborn, because you already have that precedent that God says every firstborn that opens the womb of any species belongs to me. Now you can redeem it, but I need, God says, which is probably just again the Levitical priests who are writing it, saying we need priests assistants. We need the Herman Blumberg assistant rabbis. We need the youth group directors. We need the director, the Sunday school directors and teachers in our temples and synagogues and whatever. And so our God has already said every firstborn belongs to me. So a firstborn child is going to go into divine service. But if you choose not, if you parents decide not to, then you can redeem the child back for a certain amount of money, and we can then hire a slave or anyone or a worker to do the work that child would have done. And based on that, they start to establish the various financial economic worth of different adults, male or female. The assumption, incorrect or incorrect, the assumption was that men would earn more as workers or even produce more than the women would. And that's probably because they recognized that there were certain times of the month or even in pregnancy that the woman wouldn't be available to work. So that limited her financial worth, whether we agree with that or not. But on the other hand, there's also, and there's a comment here in Eitz Chaim, there's a comment that says, but don't forget that does mean that women were still valued. Okay, there was a value. It may not have been equal value, but they were still valued. Then the other piece of this also, because it's also in Leviticus, no, I'm sorry, it's not in Leviticus, but we're going to anticipate it in the second parsha of Numbers. Now is the Nazirite vow, the individual who pledges himself or herself, it could be a woman, to abstain from certain things. That's the Samson story, to abstain from certain practices, but also to be able to work in for divine service, avodah, what we've talked about that word over the last couple of months. But that's a voluntary oath. Okay? That's a Nazir. That's the Nazarite, not the Nazarene, but that's the Nazarite who takes that oath for a particular period of time. And again, they needed to have some kind of a of a category, of a scale of what that person's time and participation in the cult was going to be worth. So that's the backstory. Sorry if it took a little bit long and went a little bit afield, but that's the backstory to understand where I think where all this is coming from.
Before I call you Beth, I just want to,
I have a question.
unfortunately, we still carry that to this day when people are injured, when
Marty,
I can't
people,
hear you.
when people are injured
Lean forward.
or if they are if they are killed or murdered, there are different valuations placed in a trial given to this day as to what what the value is of a human child, the potential human child, what person. It depends on their occupation, depends on what their contribution to life. It isn't equal, and it isn't equal here. This is only the basic part. But it is not equal even in today's law, and it is very, very difficult the way things have done. But a human life now has a value attached to it.
I'll email this to you as well. Okay? Is there anything else that we should be doing or anything? No, they're going to start billing us. They're going to start laying eggs, and they're going to start defecating, and it'll just kind of get one of those situations where it just tends to attract more pigeons if they're not skirted off. Okay. Yes, that's how. I thought that when we first installed that, there was supposed to be some.
It's a small area that his office is in.
That's solar people.
Yes.
Correct. That was eventually solar. Yeah. Okay, guys. Sorry to bother you. No.
Okay. Yes, Marsha, please.
I have a maybe an irrelevant question. When we talked about the birth of a male child, the first birth who was a male child, for some reason in the back of my head, I remember being told that since my first child was a male, and I didn't have to pay that amount because I was a daughter of a Levi. Is that have anything to do with this story you just told?
Rabbi, that's a good question.
I'm sorry, I had to deal with somebody at the door. I didn't hear Marcia's question.
Okay, when my son, who was my firstborn, was born, that they didn't have to pay something because I was a daughter of a Levite. Is that something that I was told? Is it true? Where is it written or what?
No, it's actually the opposite.
Okay, tell me what I didn't
Is
do.
that the son of someone in the line of the priests or the Levites are the ideal candidates that would have to be redeemed. So so I'm not sure either somebody said, okay, we're paying for it. Don't make Marcia pay. We're taking care of it. Or something like that. I'm not really sure that I understand why
I
you were
didn't
off the hook.
understand either. And
I had to be redeemed. I mean, my dad got a discount because he knew the because he knew the priest. But you know, but and it's a Levite
William, was
family.
that from jail or was it from birth? No, I'm only kidding.
I'm sorry, Marty didn't hear you.
No, I was just saying, was that from jail or was it from birth?
No, that was from birth, but they do it differently in New York. What can I say?
yes,
Yeah.
I'm from New York,
It
so
was a
we-
Manhattan court. What can I say? Oh,
it was from Brooklyn, so it was okay.
no, this
But
was
I
in, well,
always,
mine was in Manhattan, so, okay.
okay,
Right.
I always use the expression that I'm a daughter of a Levi and I have special privileges. I don't know if it's true.
Today, that's
Well, it is true. It's yichus,
It's
you
the
know.
Okay.
aristocracy, the
Oh.
Kohanim and the Leviim. And I did not have to pay for my firstborn because I had a cesarean.
right,
Ah,
right.
Well, that's true. Marcia, was it cesarean or was it a regular birth?
It was a regular bird.
Oh, okay, all right. I don't know why they let you off the hook.
Okay, I don't know either. Well, my grandfather had special rules in a very religious congregation. The women were always upstairs.
Right.
But I sat next to him with all the older men because I was his granddaughter. And he said, she doesn't have to sit up there. Now, I don't know these stories that they told me because I wasn't knowing. So anyway, thank you for the information that I don't know how
Thank
to
you for
read.
the story.
anything. Bye. Thank you.
Yes, Beth.
Would it be, since we have Suzanne back with us, Marty, do you want to ask the question that I would be really interested in hearing that you talked about from the
Put her on the spot.
yeah,
Yeah.
Suzanne, we were talking about the basis of the ability to ask questions about what we read in the Torah in Judaism. And we were wondering if what the perspective was questioning the Bible in your upbringing.
Had to unmute me. I don't remember a lot of questions being asked when I was growing up. I was raised in the Lutheran Church. And then when in my late teens or as I was going off to college, I walked away from church, God, and everything. And was like that for, well, about 40 years actually. But I do remember a little bit from Sunday school, and I cannot say that questions were encouraged. I did hear part of that discussion before our power got cut. And I would say that it was more of this is it and this is how you're supposed supposed to believe. And I'm not going to say that was the reason I walked away, but I will say that that contributed to it. Yes. And I also got in trouble in Sunday school one time because it was near the time of the resurrection, and there was a little bit of anti-Semitism being taught as I see it now, where the Jewish people were blamed for the death of Christ, and I spoke up and said, well, no, that can't be true because it was supposed to happen. And Christ himself said it was going to happen. And of course, my response did not go over very well. So yeah, I mean, that's about the best I can say. I can't, no, I was not part of the Catholic Church at all, but I can remember a lot of my Catholic friends coming home from school with their knuckles on their hands being very red from being hit with rulers by the nuns for asking questions or disagreeing, or whatever the case may be. And so I would have to say that questions were not tolerated.
Does in the faith community in which you participate now, how are questions about a biblical text or something, how are they handled? That there's only one way of understanding something, or each person's entitled to interpret it as he or she would like?
Well, I don't really go to church at all. I'm kind of under house arrest because of Medicare and the in-home therapy that I get. I don't walk well. But from what experience I did have going to Pastor Bruce's church, well, not during the sermon, of course, but in some of their Bible studies, people did ask questions, and discussion was encouraged. Actually, I would say there are really like just a couple points that there really can't be discussion on in order to be considered a Christian. And that is that Yeshua is the Son of God, and that he died for our sins and rose from the dead. I mean, that's the gospel. So those 2 points, or 3, however you want to count it, I mean, that's cast in stone. But anything else, I did note that people asked questions and were trying to understand what scripture was saying, because it's not always clear. And especially when you get all these different translations, things get lost. Our English language isn't as descriptive as, say, Greek or Hebrew, for example. So yeah, people do have questions, and you're not going to learn if you don't ask questions.
Thank you.
Hey, thank you very much. Yes, Gail.
I just have a really quick question, Suzanne. Was that Missouri Synod when the Lutheran Church
Gail, can't hear you.
was that Missouri Synod that you were associated with as a child?
Originally, when I was real little, we went to Missouri Synod, but when I got a little older, and by that I mean 7 or 8, my BFF at the time was going to a Lutheran church that was up the street from where we lived. So we started going to that one, and that was not the Missouri Synod. But for everyone to understand, the Missouri Synod actually was very strict. And of course, Lutherans derived from Martin Luther, and who was German. And yeah, so the Missouri Synod was not only strict, but very, very German, I guess you could say. Some of the Missouri Synods would give their sermons in German.
Interesting.
Not the one we had gone to, but some did.
I do know that I was involved with the Missouri Synod congregation for a while, and they, like you say, they're very strict.
Yes.
And women are not encouraged to speak. Really, they're just not. They're encouraged to do lots of things, but not to speak.
Interesting.
Wow.
Mhm.
This has been a very enlightening discussion all morning. I've learned an awful lot.
Yeah, could I?
Sure.
Yeah, just for my own curiosity, my edification, my knowledge, not too relevant to Torah study, but what's the affiliation of the local Lutheran churches? Like,
Speak up, Steve. Guys, please. Steve.
sorry, I was turning things.
Painful not to hear you.
But I was just asking what the affiliation, just to be enlightened on the affiliation of the local Lutheran churches that
Well,
we
there's
go
three.
to for.
I believe there's 3 different synagogues, the Lutheran church here in Green Valley. Is that correct, Suzanne?
I thought it was only 2. There's Desert Hills, and they're I think evangelical Lutherans. And
Wow.
then there's the one down the street, Risen Savior.
Right.
I think they're the same. They're the same. Neither
bet.
one of them are the Missouri Synod.
Oh,
Okay.
okay.
They seem, the atmosphere there, at least when I go to concerts, seems to be kind of liberal. So I was just curious. And
The evangelical Lutheran group, or however you want to say, is a very liberal organization, very liberal.
Okay.
thank you.
Thank you.
When I lived in Santa Fe, our temple group was so small that we could fit into the library of the Lutheran church. And we felt very welcome there for years. And I don't know what their affiliation was, but we had this really nice relationship. And then they got a new pastor and we got kicked out. So, I don't know if it was the pastor or if it was perhaps a different, whatever you call it, denomination. But they decided they didn't want Jews in the church.
Martin Luther actually was anti-Semitic.
Yep.
And I was abhorred when I found that out. I mean, he was horrible to Jewish people.
Well, he was.
It knocked my socks off.
Well,
He
the
was
Jews
good
were
to them
so.
in the beginning, but when they rejected his preachings, that's when he turned on them. So at the very beginning, he was very welcoming, but the Jews would have none of it, and that's when he got PO'd and wasn't good from there on.
That has happened before in history. Yes.
No, that was, I was just agreeing.
Okay.
That little bit of history is a little bit I know about it, that initially he assumed that this would be very attractive to the Jews, that they would accept, his doctrine and that the Jews would accept his doctrine.
Yeah, there was already a precedent set, major precedent set. Anyway, any other discussion on this? We've drifted away from vows a little bit. Any other comments about that? The assessments or yes, go ahead.
Just to understand this. Sorry, I'm going to speak to the microphone. Just to clarify for myself, to better understand the circumstances that we're talking about. We're talking about redeeming all sorts of people. Can like ordinarily, it's the firstborn son who is dedicated to serving
Mhm.
in a priestly capacity. But women aren't ordinarily in that capacity. Children are not ordinarily in that capacity. So what are we redeeming them from? Or is this just generic discussion of redemption? Is this redeeming them from indentured slavery or indentured servitude? What exactly, just for my own understanding more, what exactly is the circumstance that we're talking about? It's not that clear to me what we're redeeming all these people from. What is it? What is it? Is it priesthood? What is it? How are they? Who made the vow to give their child to an entity? What are we talking
No,
about?
no, it's not necessarily.
Backstory.
There's two things. There's those, and we're talking specifically with the firstborn son. That's the one kind of redemption. The others are, like I say, like a vow not to present yourself necessarily for voluntary servitude, but it could be a financial pledge. The same way that we talk today of I make a pledge, I'll pledge $100 a month or whatever it might be, and then these were the suggested. Somebody said again. I had a student in the Torah study class years and years and years ago. It was a beloved attorney by the name of Marcus Simon. Uh, who said he said I can see see the guy sitting there with his abacus trying to figure out exactly how much we need this year for the sanctuary, and then dividing it up. Well, if the population, if the with the sense, because they've had the census, so if we know that we have this many people, this many adult males between such and such an age, and this many adult females, and figured it all out. And that's that. So if you want to be a good Jew, if you want to be a good Israelite, if you want to be sanctified, again, this is all in the context of how does one earn holiness, then your responsibility is to participate in the well-being and the well-being of the priests and the Levites and the upkeep of the sanctuary. It's going to cost you such and such.
Okay, so we're not talking about putting up your child for collateral. We
No.
are talking about
No. That's, like I said, that's a different. Right. That's a different thing. That's the redemption of the firstborn. But on the other hand, it's like, okay, so if a family comes to join the temple, not necessarily BSTC, but a temple that does have a religious school and all that, and they say, okay, well, for each parent, it's for each adult in the family, it's X amount of dollars for your annual dues, and for each child who's going to go to religious education and then prepare for a bar mitzvah, and whatever, there's an additional charge of such and such. That's the structure.
Okay, yes, I was reading. Was Suzanne or Beth's hand up first?
It was me.
Go
Okay.
ahead.
I just a quick question. And are these charges yearly? Is that how they're to be taken?
I don't know. Does it particularly say?
It doesn't, but because it gives the different ages, that makes me think that this was some yearly thing.
I think it's yearly. I think you're right. I think it's annual.
Okay.
Okay, I don't know.
It
Yes,
also could be lifetime, but in that, within that category, as long as you're in that age category. But I think it's annual.
Okay.
Beth.
So I'm with Steve in my confusion, except now from what you're saying, Rabbi, basically we're looking at the first listing of temple dues.
Call it that if you will.
I mean,
or-
I don't mean
or-
it facetiously that,
No, I know that. Yeah,
Yeah.
right. And it
Okay.
goes. This is adding another layer of. So earlier on in Leviticus, in the Torah portion of Terumah,
mhm,
that everybody is supposed to bring bring a voluntary gift according to how his or her heart so moves them.
which is my favorite line in Teruma.
Yeah, the fully true mob. Okay, so bring be lifted up, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You can't run a business that way.
Right.
Okay, I mean, yeah, believe me, I've got lots of experience with fair share dues and all these different kinds of models for how to support the synagogue. Uh, can't imagine that it's that much different from what it was like in the wilderness. So
Mhm.
they had some people say, okay, well, how much is if everybody brings according to their own what their heart so moves them, is that going to be enough? Is it more than enough? And how so there are some who said no, we need a very, very structured category system for adults, for minors, for students, and for the senior citizens, whatever. Yeah.
So without your guidance on this, when I read it before we talked about what it meant, I thought what I was looking at was if somebody dies and they're of a certain age or a certain sex, then this is what they're monetarily worth, as Marty talked about with insurance companies. I didn't see anything here that gave me the tip off that this was what I would describe as tithing.
Yeah, it is similar. Well, tithing is by definition is 10%.
Oh, okay.
Right. They're doing it differently. But there is a connection because in other places where it's talking about like for example, the accidental death, two men are arguing or whatever,
Mhm.
and a bystander, a woman walks past and she's bumped into and she falls and she dies, or the fetus within her is that, and they said, okay, so the punishment is based on the financial worth of the person, or the
Mhm.
potential worth of, so, but what is it?
Mhm.
Okay, and just they said, well, if there was intention involved, there you add an extra 20%, an extra fifth, things like that. So now they're realizing, like I say, it's the end of the book. We're trying to wrap everything up and give
Mhm.
as much detail as possible. So if you're going back into those other examples from a few chapters ago, now you can apply it. Because the
Well,
last time it didn't
thank you,
specifically say what's the worth of this individual by
because
age or by sex.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
Well-
call it no pay, no pray.
Yeah. And incidentally, can I say, most rabbis are very uncomfortable. Mary can say that, very uncomfortable with the notion of the board or the institution saying this is what you must pay. Most rabbis that I know of would certainly be comfortable with, support it to the extent that you feel comfortable doing so. But then the board says, but it's not enough.
Sometimes.
Yeah.
Steve,
Yeah, just, I'm sorry, but I remain confused. And I want to explain why I remain confused. And I want to just really clarify my question. What we're talking about right now is sort of a universal assessment of people. Okay, this is what the children are worth. This is what you have to pay. There's vowing. The key word that seemed to be is, where's the vow? You're saying if you vow, this is the amount that has to be paid in order to redeem that person. Where's the vowing? Is the vow universal? 100% of the congregation have made a vow? No, I mean, no.
This
Some
is-
people make a vow, and some people don't. You know, it says if you make a vow,
And it's
okay?
a vow.
If you make a vow, if you've given this child, if you've given this.
Okay,
So
two
that's the part I'm not getting.
two quick linguistic things. Steve, look at the Hebrew. Okay, it's ki yafli. It's not im yafli. It's not if. It's when or because. Okay, it's not the if is misleading. Okay, it's the Hebrew is ki.
He could
All right.
be,
Okay, so it's when someone makes this vow. Is the assumption that everyone does? You hope so. All right, but we don't know for sure. The also is that a neder. Remember, like think from Kol Nidre on Yom Kippur. Okay, a neder is a vow that has an underlying sacred purpose to it. Okay, it's not just a simple like I promised to a simple promise between two people. It's for a sacred act. It has it's the fulfilling or omission or commission of a particular, even call it a mitzvah, if you will.
well, except that specifically you gave the example of Kol Nidre. Kol Nidre, my understanding is that emerged from, forced apostatism and so that these people that were forced to abandon the religion, they're released from that vow. That's when Kol Nidre emerged, was.
But that's when it became much more important in the liturgy and in the connection to Yom Kippur. But the idea of I mean, there's a whole tractate of the Talmud on nidarim.
Right, yeah.
Okay, that predates that, the issue of forced conversions and things like that.
I'm just remain puzzled that the concept of a vow is presumed to be universal. Everybody has made the vow, and you
It's not everybody. The ideal might be that everyone would participate, but it's not a recognition that everyone does.
The individual.
It's when this situation has arisen, and when you need to add some kind of a explanation, categorization to it.
Yeah. Except theoretically, if that vow were not to be redeemed monetarily, what would be the level of obligation of that person?
I'm sorry, you're breaking up. I can't hear you well.
No, I just understand. Let's assume that the vow was made and remains unredeemed monetarily.
Unpaid for? Somebody who makes the pledge and doesn't pay it?
Didn't pay to get out, kind of, what is the obligation at that point? I just want to understand what the vow is. It's not adding up to me. It's a little bit, just I won't be relentless on this. We'll let I'm allowed to be confused.
Okay. Well, again, I'm not sure. We have to see if
my confusion and let everybody else.
we have to see if later on, if the text does specifically deal with someone who makes a pledge and doesn't live up to it, right? Or is it just as you said, is there some kind of alternative? If you make a pledge and then find that financially you can't fulfill it, is there an alternative? Yes, there is. We encountered that earlier on in the text. That was between person and person in a business context. Is the same? Does it follow the same pattern when we're talking about the synagogue or the sanctuary, things like that? It's a much larger issue. Marty's going,
Yeah.
Actually, if it, and again, it depends on interpretation. If you are, let's assume here's a different interpretation for it. Let's assume your child is sick and you're praying to God, if, and you say, I will do this in your honor. Okay,
Or you're saying actually you're going to dedicate your child to God if he lives.
Yes,
something like
that's
that.
one vow.
Okay.
But let's say your child, it includes the rest. In my understanding, that if it's a child that you between the ages of such and such, and you say, oh, please God, make him well. I will do this if you do it. It's, well, you have a monetary value. And this is, it's the value of a shekel or a half shekel, depending on the age, or 20 shekels or 10 shekels, depending on sex, and maybe they're older, and it's going to be a different value on the worth of that person in our community, who does the work in our community, whether they're capable of doing it. But, oh, please make my grandfather well. I love him so dearly. Okay, this is what you're going to be expected to pay, as not necessarily this amount in silver or gold, but the worth of a shekel, or in grain, in
it's
food.
the value of.
And that's why the word value was used by Rabbi Plow. We're getting
Yes.
into a technicality. It's really, we are dealing with value. And I have a hard time when we talk about people, especially people. How do you put value on that? How do you put a value on your pet? But they did. They had to have some order in society. Some people may want to pay more because they can afford it. Some people may want to pay less in the value of what they produce. Maybe it's handicraft. Maybe, that has a value attached to it. There are different ways, but they had to start somewhere. And so they're placing a value on age and sex and things like that. And I think that is all that they're doing here. And then it's up to you to decide, going back to the individual, this is the basis. But if you want to pay more, that's fine, please do. If not, well, we have other things that we did earlier in the text that said, well, you may still have to do this, and that's yet to come, because that wasn't discussed here. So maybe it has to be discussed in Talmud and other groups of rabbis over the ages as the need came up. Well, what about this? What about that? And they had to have these discussions. This may be the origin of all of these discussions about value.
Could I say something?
Sure.
Yeah. 'Cause
Okay.
I'm not to persevere. I'm just sorry that I'm being a
No.
little dense about this, but
It's okay.
my understanding, my simple understanding of a vow is it's a very open-ended thing. I could say, if I get over this illness, I'll be a good Jew for a year.
Okay.
I can say, if I get over this illness, I'm gonna be a Jew, a good Jew for 2 years, okay? If I get over this illness, you know, the vow is, you know, a very open-ended thing. So I'm just curious, because what we're doing is, you know, I understand you're sort of expanding and explaining, but that's not my simple understanding of what a vow is, you know? I just want to understand the language and what truly they were discussing here, what the actual situation was that they were discussing. You're saying that there's a specific value that's set, you know, but that's not the nature of a vow. A vow is a very open-ended thing. People end up saying all sorts of things that end up getting them in trouble. Want to get out of it, you know? Because they're in some sort of dire straits and they say, oh, you know, if only this, you know, happens, if only if I get out of here, oh, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, you know. So it's kind of sounds like these vows that are being made, that are free will vows, you're offering a child, or you're offering your spouse, or, you know, I just want to have a better, clear understanding of what the actual social situation was, what actually happened. You know, it doesn't sound like it's dues to the temple.
That comes later. Stop,
oh.
stop with dues. That has not,
Okay.
has nothing, we're dealing with vows. And a vow is like an oath.
Right?
It's 8 minutes, 9 minutes.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, what was she saying?
I think we're running over.
Oh,
Go ahead,
we're running
repeat
over.
what you said. Go ahead,
Who?
Marcia, I think, said something.
Masha. We're
No.
running over.
No, I was just contemplating.
Oh,
Well,
right.
Suzanne had a hand up too, and then, and Beth and whatever, so.
Okay. I, like Steve, I don't quite get what this singular vow means.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. But what this brings to mind is in Judges, and I forget the guy's name, but he
Oh.
vows to God that whoever
Yiftach,
oh, you know what I'm gonna, the guy that
yeah,
and
uh-huh.
his daughter is
About his
the next-
daughter, right,
Yeah.
right.
And so in reading this, it sounds like if you make a vow, and it shall by thy estimation, and then the estimation appears to be payment. But in that particular story, there was no payment. She had to go serve in the temple or synagogue. I mean, that was her fate to
I
serve and I assume not get married.
because he thought the first thing that was going to run to him was the dog.
Right, a dog or, yeah,
Mhm.
he just never thought about his daughter. But
had to-
here it's saying if you do a vow, then you can pay. And it just seems, I mean, the stories seem to conflict. So I don't know, I mean, did the rabbis have any input on that?
Well, that was already addressed by the rabbi. Okay, in a way.
Oh.
Because the money, if a priest was involved, is what you would pay the priest.
Oh, well, all right. I guess I didn't understand that, Marty, because the daughter had to go into service, but that's not what this is saying.
So the monetary equivalent, and then possibly something else had to be taken into account, like you said. Something had to be paid somewhere. Now, maybe it was silver, maybe it was green, but if you didn't have that, maybe it had to be
For wages.
working until that was achieved. Whether you worked, or your daughter worked, or your son worked, or your wife put in extra hours there. Who knows? It isn't stated. That's part of the problem. We're not the only group that at this time and place runs into this difficulty. We're all bringing into it all the different ideas based on what each of us have been exposed to in the past. And hopefully, after we set some order to this, we will understand it for the future, for our lives, and it'll still be chaotic, as Steve said. I still don't understand this, and I don't either, okay? Because of all the variations on the theme. But if you think of our legal system today, it's a gazillion times worse.
Okay.
Because we have set values on so many other things. So before we, this is just for human beings. But wait, we haven't gotten into property yet, or farm animals. We haven't discussed that yet.
Okay.
Go ahead, Beth, and then Grace.
Okay,
and-
and we are running over, so the Oxford English Dictionary says a definition of a vow is as a verb is to solemnly promise to do a specific thing. And then in the archaic, it's to dedicate to someone or something, especially a deity. So, Steve, I too had issue from the beginning with the word vow, but I see vow as actually very binding. We don't talk about marriage maybes, we talk about marriage vows. And to me, if I vow to do something, I promise to do something. It's not open-ended. I'm saying I'm going to do this particular thing. I can't hear you, Steve.
No, I just said I wasn't implied by open-ended. I didn't imply that it wasn't binding, because then it isn't. I was implying that you could be creative in whatever you want to say you're going to do or you're going to give.
Well, that's why we have a lot of divorces.
To the vower. You are. Like I said, I promised to be a good Jew for a year. I promised to be a good Jew for 10 years.
And then when asked, what does that even mean? What does being a good Jew mean? And since it's almost 12:15, that we'll have to talk about that another time.
Okay, we've run over time, and because of that, interpersonal discussions, I want to put an end to. Let's hear from Grace, and then the rabbi will finish up with everything. Please, Grace.
Okay, so I went to my Torah index and I looked up vow, and the pages that it gave me does not include Leviticus. So the books that it gave me does not include Leviticus. I don't think we're talking about a vow in this reading as much as a dedication of, it's about economics, right? So that's all I have to say. I just want to think about, supporting the sanctuary is what this has taught me today, is how to support the sanctuary. And that's why we have so many committees, and people in leadership that help us discern what a reasonable amount of contribution we can make as an individual to our temple and our sanctuary. That's all I have. But thank you.
Thank you, Grace. Rabbi Norman, and
Okay,
then
I'll do this very quickly. One, let me offer. I'll do a little bit of research and summarizing, and if we can start off with it next week, if you'd like. And the other is, again, I go back to the Hebrew, and the verb that goes along with this noun, which they're translating as vow, but in light of especially what Grace is saying, I think that there's probably a better term for it that doesn't lead us astray. But it's ki yafli neder, okay, or ki yifle, yafli, whichever binyan we're using, which that's that adds a dimension of wonder. Remember, like from Micha Mocha, the end of Osei Fele. Okay, who was like you, oh God, that does wonders. So this is not just something a simple pledge or what. This is something that was wondrous and awe-filled in the in the person or persons who made this pledge or made this promise or all uttered the oath, if you will. So I think we have to remember there's that context to it. It's all, as Grace was saying, as Beth was saying, it's all within the context of something that they saw as a holy act. It was supporting the sanctuary. It was also still affirming their individual relationship with God and with the people. And with that, I need to leave. I don't know about anybody else.
Okay, we all do.
But before we close,